Back in Black, which is the first album that they released after Bon Scott, rest in peace, Bon Scott, passed away. And this is the first album after that incident. And what a classic to this day. I mean, it's still so refreshing to hear these songs on radio compared to what else is out there these days. You got Back in Black, Hell's Bells, and You Shook Me All Night Long, singles from this album. Can you imagine those three on one album? Incredible. And wow, what a debut album from their quote-unquote not so new singer anymore, Brian Johnson. You couldn't have asked for a better outcome for an album after Bon Scott passed away for AC/DC. And I'm really just in awe that they've been around for this long. And I'm not sure if you heard the latest album, but it's actually pretty damn good, you know, considering they've been around for what seems ages, at least 45 years, because this is when Back in Black came out. And man, we got to pay our respects to AC/DC and their live show. I'm telling you, they still kick ass. And Angus Young is still as energetic as ever, just running around the stage. Man, check out this picture. Back in the day, Angus Young rocking out his Gibson SG. So cool. All right, let's get into it. Back to the Future. The death of AC/DC frontman Bon Scott in February 1980 looked like it might have also dealt a fatal blow to the band. But then they got a new singer and made a career rejuvenating record that became the biggest selling rock album of all time. Back in Black. Really? Wow. Article by Paul Elliott. I'm actually quite surprised about this. I thought it was Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. I know they have some sort of record of being in the Billboard Top 100 for the longest consecutive weeks, or the longest weeks total ever. So that's interesting. That's cool. Good to know. They obviously deserve it. For Angus Young, the pre-show ritual was the same as it had always been. In the dressing room backstage at the Palais d'Exposition in the Belgian city of Namur, AC/DC's lead guitarist changed out of his jeans and t-shirt and put on his schoolboy uniform, went for a piss, and had one last cigarette to take the edge off his nerves. But this was no ordinary gig. On this evening, June 29th, 1980, AC/DC were about to perform in public for the first time with their new singer, Brian Johnson. And in the last few minutes before going on stage, as Angus looked around the room, he could see the tension in Johnson's face. He was shitting himself, Angus said. Johnson had big shoes to fill. The man he'd replaced, Bon Scott, had been a great rock and roll singer and charismatic frontman, a free-spirited hellraiser whose easy charm earned him the epithet Bon the Likeable. Following Bon's death in February that year, the band had pushed on with Johnson to make the album Back in Black, of which Angus later said, "When I first heard it in all its glory, I thought, fuck, it's magic." But on that warm summer evening, with the release of the album still a few weeks away, Johnson was a worried man as he waited for showtime, wondering how AC/DC fans would react to him, especially when he was singing the old songs, Bon's words. It was only when he got on stage and looked out into the audience that he realized how much those fans were rooting for him. In the audience, he saw a banner raised aloft on which it was written, "Rest in peace, Bon Scott. Good luck, Brian." That, he recalled, just lifted me. There were moments during the show when all that anxiety and adrenaline got the better of him. It was a very traumatic night, he said. I was so nervous. Halfway into the set, he had a brain freeze and sang the same lyrics to two songs. I thought, oh God, what have I done? For that, he received a bollocking from rhythm guitarist Malcolm Young, Angus's elder brother. Malcolm looked at me and went, "What the fuck was that?" Come on, Malcolm, give the guy a break. It's his first night out, man. Perfectionist. Okay, it was baptism of fire, but Johnson got through it. He won the respect of that audience by singing his balls off and by being his own man. The flat cap he wore was a sign of his working-class roots in the northeast of England, and his onstage demeanor was different from Bon's. Johnson was a cajoling, fish-shaking, ramble-rouser, but without the macho swagger that Scott had, or the glint of craziness that was always in his eyes. Johnson also knew from the start how the band worked on stage, ceding the center ground for Angus to run amok. That night, AC/DC performed 7 songs from Back in Black, beginning with album opener Hell's Bells. The set ended with Let There Be Rock, significantly the last song Bon ever sang on stage, just 5 months earlier at Southampton Gaumont on January 27, 1980. Wow! I didn't realize that they released an album 5 months only after his death. That's kind of crazy. Not sure how long it took for them to actually record it then. Mustn't have taken them that long. Johnson later said of the Moore Show, "We had enough spirit to cover up any mistakes. On a deeper level, there was also a feeling within the band that they had a spirit watching over them. As Angus said in the first days after their new singer had joined them, we still think Bon's around." Bon Scott had known in his last days that AC/DC were on to something big. Their 1979 album, Highway to Hell, was the band's first million seller, and in the early days of January 1980, when work began on new songs in London, he was buzzing. These new songs were demoed by Angus and Malcolm, with Bon playing drums. As he had done in his first groups back in Australia, he was convinced that he had the markings of an album that would be even bigger than Highway to Hell. In a phone call to his mother, Isa, in Australia, he had told her, "This one is going to be it." It was only a few days after that call on February 19th, 1980, that Bon was found dead in East Dulwich, London. He had been out drinking with friends the previous night. Rumors suggested that he might also have taken heroin. In the official inquest, a coroner's report cited death by misadventure. Bon was just 33. Wow. That's crazy. Live fast, die young. Some people just, are born that way. It was at Bon's funeral in his hometown of Fremantle in Western Australia that his father, Chick, urged Malcolm and Angus to carry on with the band. On April 1st, Johnson, then 32, formerly of glam rock band Geordie, was announced as AC/DC's new singer. Nassau, on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas, was a tropical paradise. As Johnson would tell Record Mirror, actually it's quite difficult recording in the Bahamas. All you want to do is lounge on a beach, and you can't get a decent pint of beer, he added, with tongue-in-cheek. Somehow we managed. What drew the band to Nassau was the caliber of Compass Point Studios, a world-class facility that had been established by the founder of Island Records, Chris Blackwell. According to Tony Platt, the engineer working on the album, alongside producer Robert Mutt Lange, it was also beneficial for the band to be in such a remote location, away from all the distractions of London or Sydney. That helped to bring everyone together, Platt said. There was something different from previous AC/DC albums, and not only because they had a new singer. While the music was anything but subtle, the change in it was. While the essence of AC/DC, the hard riffing, the heavy grooves, remained intact, the tone had shifted a little. It was rock and roll, but with more of a heavy metal edge. And what Mutt Lange had begun with the band on Highway to Hell, adding a touch of sheen while retaining maximum power, was brought into full effect. The sound was huge, and at the highest end of it was Johnson's voice, pushed to its limit. That's a really good point. If you go back and listen to that album, the sound on that, the way it was mixed, the way it was produced, and just the sound, the guitar sounds, the drum sounds, just sounds phenomenal. Mutt Lange, for those of you who don't know, he's obviously a very famous producer, and he worked with Bryan Adams and also Def Leppard. So he definitely knows what he's doing. From what I've read, I heard he's quite the perfectionist. But I mean, he definitely has a sound that he goes for and pushes his bands to the limit, take after take, to get what's in his head out there. And, you really can't complain. I mean, look at his track record. Unbelievable albums. So he did Bryan Adams' Waking Up the Neighbors album and also Def Leppard's Hysteria. Not too shabby. Okay, I'm not going to read you the whole interview. I'm going to leave you a little mystery just in case you want to go check it out for yourself. But I'll pick and choose a couple of specific incidents where they talk about the album. As Angus confirmed in a 1991 interview, some lyrics written by Bon were used in the new songs. In other songs, there were echoes of his spirit and sense of humor. Just as Bon had poked fun at religion in Let There Be Rock and Highway to Hell, so Bryan delivered a Christian baiting one-liner in Hell's Bells. If good's on the left, then I'm sticking to the right. In a similar vein, the bluesy, boogie, rock and roll ain't noise pollution. The last track recorded for the album, written on the spot in around 15 minutes, had an intro in which Brian did what he called the Southern preacher thing, just talking off the top of his head and hailing with missionary fervor the life-affirming power of rock and roll. With the album completed in 6 weeks. 6 weeks for such a classic. Unbelievable. Wow. No wonder it only took 5 months from Bon Scott's death to the release of the album. That's crazy. So 6 weeks. They knew what they had was dynamite. Atlantic Records knew it too. The only problem, as the label saw it, was the band's idea for the album cover, all black, with the AC/DC logo and album title, The Only Detail. It was suggested by Atlantic that this would not be good for business, but the band would not yield. As Angus put it, the whole Back in Black album was our dedication to Bon. That's why the album cover was pure black, and why the album starts with a bell ringing. Something somber and different to anything else we've done. Wow, pretty cool, right? I didn't really think about that, but yeah, it makes sense now. That's so cool that they stuck to their guns and did that. Okay, there's a fun fact bubble here. The Beastie Boys sampled Back in Black for their 1984 song Rock Hard. They sought AC/DC's permission after the fact, but permission was denied based on AC/DC's anti-sampling policy. Wow. So they probably didn't make a dime off that song. Not sure if they released it as an official single, though. Actually, this reminds me of the story behind P. Diddy's Puff Daddy, freaking stupid criminal that abuses women, whatever you want to call him, song called Missing You, where he ripped off Sting's, or I should say the Police's Every Breath You Take bass lick. Some of you may recall that was a hugely popular song because after Notorious B.I.G. died, that was one of the singles, and it was called Missing You. P. Diddy talking about his friend and reminiscing on that song. But guess what? He never asked Sting, the songwriters, permission to use that freaking sample, super recognizable sample. He never asked permission, believe it or not. And so he was stuck. The song, I think, was already released. It was already popular. It was in mainstream pop culture. He asked Sting's permission, and I think they negotiated. So Sting obviously had the upper hand and had P. Diddy by the balls. And I heard something crazy like Sting makes like $3,000 a day off that song or something like that, at least back then before streaming. Isn't that crazy? But yes, if you're an artist, you got to do things right. Ask permission, get that license, or else it's just not worth it. Okay, there's a section here talking about Back in Black was an immediate hit. Within 2 weeks of its release, it was at number 1 in the UK. The first single from it, You Shook Me All Night Long, made the top 40 in the UK and US and the top 10 in Australia. By early October, when the band finished touring in North America, the album was certified platinum in the US as it began an incredible 13-month residency in the Billboard Top 10. It had been a punishing schedule in North America, 64 shows in 3 months, and there was no let-up. The resurrection of AC/DC with Back in Black was arguably the greatest comeback in the entire history of rock and roll. Out of their darkest hour had come a heroic victory. Guns N' Roses guitarist Slash was just 15 when Back in Black was released. Many years later, he recalled the impact that record had on him and spoke of it as a triumph not just for Brian Johnson and AC/DC, but also for rock music, period. Back in Black saved rock and roll, Slash said. It was a defining rock record of that time, and it just exploded. AC/DC was always a great band, totally genuine. But the miracle of the whole thing was that Back in Black was just a great new record. It was still AC/DC. We all miss Bon, but we let him go and at the same time welcomed and embraced Brian. The key songs from Back in Black, the title song was Jerry Cantrell once called the ultimate rock song. Hell's Bells, Shoot to Thrill, and You Shook Me All Night Long have remained in AC/DC's live set for decades. Of course, I mean, it'd be very hard to go to an AC/DC concert without them playing those 3 songs for sure. Most remarkable of all in the sheer scale of this album's success, Back in Black is not only the biggest selling rock album there has ever been, bigger than anything by Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, the Rolling Stones, or even the Beatles. With more than 50 million copies sold, it's also the second biggest selling album of all time after Michael Jackson's Thriller. No way! All right, I think a lot of people knew that Michael Jackson's Thriller was top. No one could beat that, but I had no idea. Wow, Back in Black is number 2? Crazy. And the fact that it's a rock album, yes. In the making of Back in Black, their tribute to Bon, as Angus Young called it, AC/DC dug deep. As Malcolm Young once said, the emotion in that album, it will be around forever. Joe Elliott from Def Leppard and millions of others who feel the same way, what AC/DC achieved on Back in Black was perfection. That record sounds as good now as it did the day it was released, Elliott said. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, first of all, sometimes, I must admit, sometimes I'm driving in my car, I hear Back in Black come on, or I hear You Shook Me All Night Long come on, and I gotta say, sometimes I do forward it just because I've heard that song just so many times, you know what I mean? It's like I don't need to hear it one more time, but sometimes I let it go and just soak in the sound and the energy of those songs. And I just love the guitar sound and tone that Angus has and Malcolm have. It's just great. And you can really understand why, wow, okay, I get it, why the world knows about this song, you know, and this album. So Elliott says, it's timeless, and very few records are like that. The first Montrose album, the first Van Halen album, the first Boston album. AC/DC was always about full-on rock and roll, based on the blues and Chuck Berry. But with Back in Black, they blew everybody else out of the water. It is one of the greatest rock albums ever made. And the sales can tell that same story. So AC/DC, I mean, no one can deny their staying power. No one can deny their sound. No one can deny their talent. And yes, have they been playing the same song for the last 50 years? Okay, one could argue yes, but it's still a pretty damn good song, you know? I mean, yes, do they play 3-4 chords in every song? Yeah, but they do it better than anyone else out there. Let's just say you had to send a package out into space for alien to discover in a couple of thousand years from now, and you wanted the aliens to understand what rock and roll was about for the human race on Earth. If you were to pick one band to represent what rock and roll was, AC/DC would be it. There's no doubt in my mind, AC/DC is it. They're the ultimate rock band. They play the biggest concerts when they tour the world, and everyone reveres them. Everyone cites them as an influence when you're into music. Thank you so much for listening. By the way, if you're digging this cap, go check out its1ladder.com. That's ITS1ladder.com. There's a bunch of rock and roll gear on there. Hopefully you'll find a thing or two that you like, and that'd be a great way for you to support the show. Really appreciate it. Rock on one ladder.